Hi, I'm Stephen J. Gross, attorney at law, and I'm practicing in West Los Angeles. I want to speak to you very briefly about the concept of asset protection. There are litigators and there are transactional lawyers, and I've had the good fortune to do both. As a litigator, I've represented judgment creditors and judgment debtors, and as a transactional lawyer, I've drafted numerous transactional documents for clients such as corporate formation, limited liability companies, and revocable living trusts. So I'm able to utilize my litigation experience when I'm drafting a document for a client. Now, the starting point for me is to determine what is really the goal of the client. Is the client looking for privacy, or is the client looking for protection, or in some cases, is the client looking for both? Let's talk very briefly about the revocable living trust and the concept of privacy. The revocable living trust does provide privacy for the reason that at death of the decedent, there's no probate court proceeding, there are no public records, so to speak, of the assets in the estate. Rather, the assets are distributed out to the beneficiaries pursuant to a private document, which is the revocable living trust. So the privacy element is there. There are two little wrinkles, however, and that is if one of the assets of the trust is real estate and there's a transfer, that is a recording of the deed in the name of the new beneficiary, the county recorder's office is most likely going to ask to see either a copy of the trust or a disclosure of who the trustee is, and a very clever attorney on behalf of a judgment creditor, once he or she knows who the trustee is, can back into it and discover the assets in the trust. The way around the problem is to appoint a bank or perhaps a business manager or the client's CPA to serve as the trustee. There is one other problem, and that is if a creditor gets a judgment against you and you become a judgment debtor, one of the remedies of a judgment creditor is to get a court order to force you to appear for a judgment debtor's examination hearing. At the judgment debtor's examination hearing, you're required to answer questions under oath, under penalty of perjury. And a very clever real estate judgment creditor attorney can ask you, do you have a revocable living trust? And if so, what are the assets in the trust? So there the element of privacy is gone, because once the attorney knows where the assets are and the name of the trust, they can grab those assets to partially satisfy, if not in whole, in full, in part, in full, the judgment. What about asset protection? Does a revocable living trust provide asset protection? And the short answer is no. Contrary to a lot of myth, there is no asset protection when it comes to a revocable living trust. The assets are reachable by creditors just as if it was in your own individual name. I'm going to speak next about, in part 2, about LLC limited liability companies in California.